Well, hello. I'm moving a little slow. It's because I didn't get to bed until nearly 7 a.m. A lot of pain. I don't know if you know it or not, but there's like historic flooding in Kentucky, and I was just scrambling to keep the basement from having major damage from flooding. The ground was already crazy saturated, and this super wide, super powerful rainstorm came through that was just absolutely off the hook, completely and utterly off the hook. Got a little bit of damage in the basement, but not a lot. But the reason why there wasn't a lot is because I was scrambling until 7 a.m., so that was really painful and unpleasant. Very, very unpleasant. I'm going to talk about something. I discovered this about 20 years ago. And when I discovered it, it absolutely shocked me. And I realized I'd not made a video about this out of like 8,500 videos. And it really spells the doom of society. Before getting to that, the last time the gold reserves in Fort Knox were examined was a couple years after I was born, so it was 50 years ago. The Muskie Muskrat tweeted out that they're going to do an audit, presumably, of Fort Knox, which is just west of here, towards Louisville. And we'll see what happens from that. By the way, on another same matter, this is a side note before starting this video, South Korea suspended all sales of gold bullion. I don't know if it includes silver right now, but they suspended that. Also, there's been major movement of gold out of the Bank of England, and there's a whole lot of movement in precious metals in the past week and a half. And there's been a lot over the past few years, but there's been a tremendous amount. I want to see what happens to gold and silver in the next few days. I actually figure it's something on the order of 70%, but that's purely speculative from my point. But we read that 50 to 70% of people don't have an inner monologue, and I actually like to clear up the distinction, which causes an enormous amount of confusion between mind, brain, and consciousness. And there's two levels, technically three levels of awareness, and awareness is reflexive, or is not reflexive at all. It's kind of like being in a room where the walls are painted with Vanta black, which I actually have some of that paint. It's the darkest black paint that exists. I mean, you can sit there with a flashlight, and it's still, you basically get no reflection back. Other people don't have self-reflexive minds, and this lack of an inner dialogue actually spells the doom for society. This is a book I've had a couple copies of now for a long time. I recommend it greatly. You can find like a used copy of it probably for $5. This is the one that I didn't crack open because the other one's falling apart. I don't know where it is. I think I might have lent it out. It's called Julian Jaynes' Origin of Consciousness and the Breakdown of the Bicameral Mind. It's actually a great book. In the book, he speculates it until the latter part of the 2nd century BCE that humanity didn't have consciousness, which unfortunately is an inaccurate term. The way he uses it, the same way they actually use the word pure consciousness in some of these Vedantic texts, like Advaita Vedanta texts and some others, where they talk about pure consciousness, and it confuses people. Because I talk about the actual true definition of consciousness from the perspective of how it's meant. And unfortunately, in English, there's really no distinction, and they're all interwoven as one thing, mind, brain, and consciousness, and they never should be, because they talk about pure consciousness. The people back then, before then, were automatically obeying the voices of the gods as they assumed them to be. And it's an astounding thesis, and people are either very much for it or very much against it, but the evidence that he lays out is extremely palpable. A lot of people don't have gatekeepers of the mind to keep dangers away, and when that happens also too, they actually become the people that will like hold you down while other people do things. This becomes incredibly dangerous, and also too becomes the impetus for society's doom. And when I actually found this out, because I can have an inner monologue and multiple inner monologues. Not that I'm sitting like a crazy person, like in a padded room, which, like 3 people, having an argument while there's just one physical person there. I'm not saying that. I don't want you to get that idea. But I can actually build things in my head and actually zoom and tilt around and take things apart in my head. And I didn't realize, I had no idea that other people couldn't do that. They act simply like receivers. There's no inner reflexive, a self-examination of whether something is faulty or evil or, let's look at this. This doesn't seem right, People, they just don't have that. They take information in, and there's no gatekeeper of the mind. I always laugh when people talk about having an open mind, and that's actually way, way more dangerous and worse than having a closed mind. You have an open mind, it's like having the front and back door open on your house while you take a vacation. It's absolutely awful. Both open and closed are not great. The worst thing you could have is an open mind, and a lot of people do. There is no inner monologue. It's like a barn where the front doors are... I have a few barns, by the way, on my farms. The front doors are open, and the rear doors are open, and the wind whistles through, and the owls and crows and birds come in. I mean, just everything passes through. And it's open for absolute ruination. Anyway, in this book, and I recommend everybody get it, it's cheap thrills to buy a U-copy, like $5 probably on eBay. I'll have a link below on Amazon, An Origin of Consciousness and the Breakdown of the Bicameral Mind. People don't bounce things off the walls of their mind and have another observer, which is not another observer, however it technically is, examine things. It's been said against this principle that, not of the book, that the figure that 30 to 50% don't have an inner monologue comes from Holbert's research, but is a misrepresentation of the fact that the test subject only has their inner voice going on when the beeper goes off. Most people don't have a beeper in their head, like danger, danger. You can sense something's wrong. They've got the mind of a barn whose front and rear are open. They could have beepers in the mind of their soul, but the batteries are dead. It's like I got 10 smoke alarms in the house, but the batteries all died a few years ago. These people don't have that. It literally does mean that upwards of 70-75% of people don't have an inner monologue. They don't. There's nothing that bounces off like a mind full of mirrors where an idea or something comes in and it's not bounced off, it's absorbed. A mind without an inner monologue, analogously, is like that room that's full of painted with Vanta black, the very blackest paint on earth. They painted a BMW in Vanta black, and it was basically the most dangerous car on earth because if it were overcast, the car basically becomes a shadow. It becomes invisible. So it would be the most dangerous car to drive around. There's a video of that on BMW. We just did this for giggles. We paint this car in Vanta black. It essentially disappeared. Unless the headlights are on, it's basically an invisible car, humorously, and of course extremely dangerous. So the railing against, because that's really shocked me about 20 years ago. I mean, now you understand society and why people do and think, and by think, I mean not think, the things that they do. This means that there's zero separation between the transcendent self and the existential self. There's zero separation. I've talked about this where they talk about holy men who are, under great stress and duress. It's like, oh, what about that miserable guy over there? He looks so scaly. You say, oh yeah, that's the holy man. These people are under spiritual polarization. There is extreme separation, kind of like polarization in the case of the creation of a magnet. we actually have here is a dichotomy between against the plane of inertia, which would be the absolute or the center, and these inverse centrifugal magnetic polarizations where you actually have a north pole and a south pole. The spiritual polarization is where you have total separation, kind of like if you shake up some oil and water, it'll all be one substance, and if you let it sit, it's kind of like my cashew butter and my almond butter in there. They tell you like every week or so, turn it upside down. That way the oil will seep up from the bottom to the top and vice versa. If you let it sit there, the nut butter and the oil will separate, and if you get a spoonful of almond butter, like I've done many times, you end up with a spoonful of oil. Not so pleasant oil. When they're together, they're great. Most people, this type of spiritual polarization is extremely rare, but the next gradation of this, of polarization between existential self and temporal self, is very common. And when I found that out, up to 2+ decades ago, it scared the living snot out of me, and it is the basis for society's doom. The outspringing of the basis of this as society's doom, I've said a million times, is this idea in beliefs. People think they are their beliefs, the things that they were told and feel and think, and they think they are that, but they're not that. Somebody that's spiritually polarized and does not confuse the existential self with the transcendent self doesn't care what you think or say or feel about them. I'm the same way. The only thing that actually ticks me off is when people lie about me. They say all sorts of horrible things on me in comments after 8,500 videos, and I don't care. You know, you're fat, you're bald, you're tattooed, I don't like you, I don't like your voice, I don't like your personality. I'm like, I kind of agree with you. Does it really matter? I don't care. The question is, am I trying to be helpful, and am I saying something truthful, logical, rational, reasonable, accurate, and at the very least wise? And this all ultimately, too, gets into differentiating out something that you were never taught, ever, between intellect, and which is lumped in with IQ, and wisdom. I've never, ever praised, doesn't mean I'm praising ignorance or stupidity. I've never praised intellect. It's not important. What do you mean it's not important? It's not important. You could be the smartest person on earth and get in a car wreck tomorrow and it'll scramble your mind, and everything you collected, like papers in a filing cabinet, just go up, as if all the papers were set on fire. The filing cabinet's still there, but all the information inside is gone. It went up in flames. Well, you spent your whole life collecting something that you knew was headed to the fire pit. This, of course, is episteme, empirical knowledge, which is never, ever to be confused with wisdom. Ever. Wisdom, of course, is self-proximity. Wisdom is, in Greek and Pali and Sanskrit, the term is vidya or vidya. It actually doesn't mean light. Well, it does, kind of. It's translated as wisdom. But it means self-proximity. Self-proximity analogously would be if you took 14-karat gold and you took it further and further into 24-karat gold, and then like quadruple 9 bullion grade, which is nearly absolutely 100% pure gold. I mean, it's gold as gold as gold. 10-karat versus, the same is true. I got this rock up here, which it's got like about $200 worth of gold in it. You can see it right there. But this rock is only, I'm assuming, about 200. You can see the gold right there. Roughly, probably over. You can really see the gold over here. This rock is only worth $30, even though there's probably $200 worth of gold in it. But if I take the efforts of refining it, removing, the substrate stone from the gold, then I might have $2,000 of gold. But I mean, as the rock sits, it's a $30 rock, $30 to $50 rock. It's gold-bearing matrix. Well, how would you pay $30 to $50 for that if there's Well, there's like $2,000 of labor, not literally, to extract the gold out from the matrix rock. So that would be wisdom, self-proximity. Taking this gold out of the matrix and having it be a pure lump of gold, that would be self-similarity. Or wisdom, self-proximity, as I've accurately called it, and this, of course, is the metaphysics of wisdom, what wisdom really is. Because wisdom and the self with a capital S, self-proximity, is one and the same thing in all serious forms of Greek, Indian, and Egyptian metaphysics. This is where people get confused. They'll actually read about pure consciousness, and of course consciousness, which is extremely accurate in ancient Pali, means anti-light, Vi plus jnana in transliteration, which literally means anti-light, the light directed away from itself. The light itself, of course, is the principle. Consciousness is consubstantial illumination. Consubstantial illumination, in the case of the radio analogy, which is nearly perfect, and is my analogy, is the broadcast. The thing that comes out of the speaker ain't the same thing as the signal. The signal is not in the antenna. The signal is everywhere and nowhere. The processing of that signal by the analog to digital converters, the circuitry, the resistors, the speaker, on and on and on and on. That thing that comes out of the speaker that we listen to is analogous to signal consciousness. The signal would be the transcendent self, because once you smash this radio, the signal is everywhere and nowhere. You haven't done anything to the signal by smashing the radio. But like a white light through a red filter would be, here's this crummy radio. Excuse me. I hate these flashlights. I never paid for these flashlights. There we go. White light through a red filter, you'd have red consciousness. White light through a blue filter, you'd have blue consciousness. That blue light, that red light, analogously, of course, is consubstantial. It's composite. Has a beginning in time and end in time. This word consciousness, even though it is incorrectly the word mind, actually, or pure mind, is translated as pure consciousness from a lot of Sanskrit works. You just keep saying that consciousness has a beginning in time and end in time, and yet in these various texts like the Upanishads and Advaita Vedanta, it'll talk about pure consciousness. It should say mind, but they've been using the English word consciousness for a long time, and they continue to do so, and it causes a lot of misunderstanding by people. Anyway, relative to the book from Julian James, abandoning the assumption that consciousness is innate, James explains instead as a learned behavior that derives from language, specifically from metaphor. This understanding, James demonstrates, the ancient texts and archaeology can reveal history of human mentality along the histories and other cultural products. There's even many examples of Christians doing anything spontaneously, and instead of blaming themselves for it or against it, they'll say, God wills it. There's even some great movies. One of them is, you've probably seen it, stars Orlando Bloom. It's called The Kingdom of God or something like that. I think that's the name of it. And in there, they grab their broadswords and they go, God wills it, God wills it. And they, of course, in their own minds, determined to do something. But this idea still exists that anything that they do, good or bad or otherwise, is the will of God. There is no separation between themselves as the radio and the things that they do. They have no idea. There's nothing evolved in them. I'm not saying humanity hadn't evolved until recently, nor does Julian James say that in his book here. But that still exists today. And if you understand and realize, like over the past few years, the horrible things that have happened in this world, wink, wink, and you know exactly what I'm talking about. How could this have happened? You're probably somebody like me, to whatever respect, who has mirrors inside your own consciousness where ideas, good or bad, does this pass the smell test? No, it does not. Like, how can these people do this, you would ask? And these people, they don't have an inner monologue. And if you understand that 75%, none of us know the real number, don't have that, it explains a lot. And when you don't have that, you spontaneously generate up ideation that you are the things that you believe. You're told to believe these things, and since you have no inner monologue, you believe these things and you think that is who you are and what you are. The cause for 95 to 100% of the world's strife is that you'll say so. Someone will say something, blah, blah, blah. And that's just not true because boom, 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 boom. How dare you go after my beliefs? Why I am what I believe and you've come after me. Like, no, I haven't. Who you are is one thing, the things you believe are another. But these people that don't have, analogously, kind of perfect, they don't have any mirrors in their mind. The walls of their mind, analogously, is like they're all painted with Vanta black. That magical black paint that's like super black. They think they are their beliefs, and they think that, that is, if you go after that, then you've gone after them. It's like, no, I haven't. But you can't work it through to them. By the way, he doesn't state that fact in this book, but that's the natural deductive and retroductive reasoning behind why people have done the things that they've done that have shocked the world of rational people like me and you, if you are one of them, over the past few years. He's basically saying in his book that a thinking person with a reflexive mind has like a little homunculus inside of our brain that guides our actions. We work it, we bounce it. There's a little homunculus in the brain of a person who has an inner monologue, and he's writing things out in a choice. Yeah, that doesn't pass the smell test. Where most people don't, and the fact that most people don't, when I found that out ages ago, it scared the living hell out of me, and nothing scares me. You have to go into the nature of consciousness. And unfortunately, as I've said many times, it is very, very awful and horrific that in English there's no distinction between mind, brain, and consciousness. But the perfect analogy, near perfect, is that mind, or nous, or spiritus sanctum, or in Pali the word is chit, which, by the way, the 5 most important words in ancient Pali are the exact same words in ancient Egyptian. Isn't that amazing? Chit, Aten. Everybody's heard of the term, ancient Egyptian term, Aten. Well, guess what that term is in ancient Pali? Aten. It's a reference to the same self. By the way, the Aten is the snake coming out of the sun. The solar self, or the absolute, the transcendent one, is the sun itself. But you'll actually see a lot of Egyptian iconography of the sun, and at the bottom of the sun there's a little cobra, that's emanating from the sun. That would be the Aten, is the snake. The same is true in Indian iconography. It refers to the snake as the footless one, because the soul doesn't leave any footprints since it's not a psychophysical being, and it's always been the symbol for the transcendent self. Same too in the Genesis book of the Old Testament. However, this is where religion destroys everything. It actually tap dances on top of metaphysics, and lets the cow do their duties all over top of it. And so people take that garbage literally. There's a snake in the Garden of Eden. It's like, no. You don't understand what that means. Sure I do. You'll actually see that in some movies. You could read about that too in early religions. People would do whatever. And they thought that they weren't doing it, and they were justified, and they had no inner monologue. God wills it, or, Lord Ahura Mazda wills it, whoever. Whichever God that they choose to believe in or otherwise. Never confuse intelligence with wisdom, by the way. So people don't have this gatekeeper of the mind to keep dangers away. When you boil it down to the facts, there's only about 20% or less of people that have an inner monologue. Like inside of their mind and existential consciousness, there's a bunch of mirrors where things are bounced back and forth. This is the reason why spiritual polarization people, are so miserable. They see the way the world really is. People, the average fool, there's 0 degree of separation between the transcendent self and the immanent self. There is no separation between the signal or the broadcast in the case of the fool. It's the same thing.
Along with other weather, hydrological...
The modulation of the signal, which of course we say frequency or wavelength, we're talking about a modulation. Talking about modulation of the air, that's the broadcast. To the fool, there is 0 degree separation. And that is really scary. A self-referencing mind that cannot be swayed by the minutiae of existential life is exactly like a laser. You could put red light a red laser on a blue wall, you'll still see the red dot. A red laser on a green wall, you'll still see the red dot. It is completely self-referential in the transcendent. It will not take upon itself attributes. Like white light through a blue filter, you get blue light. White light through a green filter, you get green light, right? It will take upon itself anything. This is where there is no separation in the case of the Fool. But there's a whole lot of gradation between this incoherent light, which is just a fancy way of saying non-self-referential. There's no inner monologue. Not that light itself is conscious. There's a huge gradation in the spectrum between this type of light and this point source light, which is completely self-referential. This would be analogous to total wisdom, and this would be analogous to total ignorance. Here's the case where we have 0 degree of separation and no inner monologue. And this is how we have the zombies. This is what a real zombie is. These are the people that will hold you down while other things are wrought upon you by even more evil people. And we look at these people, it's like, how do these people, what is wrong with these people? They have no inner monologue. They are an entity whose mind is painted Vanta black. There's no mirrors inside the holographic consciousness of their existential being. They identify with and as the things that they believe. They don't think that there is a transcendent signal. They think that they're the programming, the nature, the build of the radio. They think they are this, the things that it thinks and computates. But you're not. Anyway, thank you so much for watching this video. I hope it kept it simple. Any donations always warmly welcome. Check me out in live stream. We have a lot of fun there. Sorry I'm kind of worn down, but I had a really rough night last night. Yeah, with all the flooding. It was rough. Thank you. Check out my Substack also, too, in the description below.